atomic batteries to power. Turbines to speed.
Roger. Ready to move out.
You ever dance with the devil in the pale moonlight?
This town needs an enema.
Riddle me this, riddle me that. Who's afraid of the big black bat?
When Gotham ashes, you have my permission to die. This is your liberation.
My mother warned me about getting into cars with strange men.
This isn't a car. 20 years in Gotham. How many good guys are left? How many stayed that way? He has the power to wipe out the entire human race. Tell me, do you bleed? You will.
I want you to tell all your friends about me.
What are you?
He's a silent guardian. A watchful protector. A dark knight. I'm Batman. Let the games begin.
Welcome to the Batman on Film podcast. Here are your hosts, Bill Jet Ramey and Rick Shue.
Thank you now for Rachel, and thank you, Fake Studio audience. Welcome to the Batman on Film podcast. I am the founder of Batman on Film, Bill Jet Ramey. Thanks for listening today. No Rick, just me, talking about all things Batman that happened this past year. Today, my guests are Andy DiGenova from Holy Batcast to talk about his experience at the Batman exhibit at Warner Brothers in Burbank. Chris Clow will come on to talk about Batman in comics this past year and some other stuff as well. And then Ron Haas comes on to talk about the video game Arkham Knight. Thanks for listening. On to the interviews. All right, our next segment on the end of year 2015 Batman on Film podcast. I have my friend Andy DiGenova from Holy Batcast. How you doing, Andy?
Great, Bill. How are you?
I'm doing great. I wanted to get you on because I wanted to talk about the Warner Brothers Batman exhibit they have over in Burbank. And I know you went. You had a video for your website and for your podcast. It was awesome. I posted it on Batman on Film because I thought it was just great.
Thank you.
And so I know it's. The whole thing started last year, 2014. It was part of Batman 75, but I'm sure it was so popular they decided at the end of last year to extend it into 2015. And I know it's, according to the Warner Brothers website, it's going to end shortly. So just tell me a little bit how it all came together. How did you get that project going?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm lucky that I live right down the street from the Warner Brothers lot, so that helps out nicely. And when we heard they were going to do a big Batman 75 thing last year, me and a group of my Bat chums had to make it a point to go there on a Saturday, so we all went and had a great time. And they had a lot of the stuff there already, and then they've just added to it over the past year or so. As BVS has wrapped, they've brought BVS stuff there. So it is the standard tour for the Warner Brothers lot, which is already a great tour. It's a great lot if you've ever had a chance to visit. But the tour guides are really cool about kind of tailoring your tour depending on where your interests lie. So you can say, they knew that we were big Batman folks, and so the guy found anything he could tell us about Batman throughout the tour before we got to like the big Batman heavy portions of it. So you tour the lot, but then they've got kind of three major huge things that are very Batman specific that you get a chance to explore. One is I think it's their I think they call it their picture car vault maybe or something. I call it the Batmobile vault because right now that's what it is. It's all Batmobiles all the time. So there are some props in there, but it's mostly Bat vehicles. So they've got the 89/92 Anton Furst Batmobile. They've got the Batman Forever Batmobile. They've got two tumblers, the black one and the camo one. They've got some of the other miscellaneous vehicles from the Schumacher films. So they have the Bat Hammer from Batman and Robin.
Okay.
And they've got the Redbird and then Batgirl cycle from Batman and Robin. So a little more randomness in there. And then this fall they did get the BVS Batmobile as well. So they made room right in the center and stuck the BVS Batmobile kind of dead center, so it's kind of now become the highlight of the tour. And then in there's a working bat symbol, and there's the statue from the finale of The Dark Knight Rises. So it's great because what's cool about this tour is that they are including every Batman film starting with 89. So even if we don't love Batman and Robin, it's still pretty cool to see the Bat Hammer, because it's something you never thought you'd see, or you never would seek out on your own. But when you're standing there in front of it, you're like, you know what? It's actually a pretty cool vehicle. Good for them. So it's nice that you get kind of that entire journey of Batman cinematically, starting with 89 and getting all the way up to the latest film that we haven't even seen yet. At least I haven't. Maybe you have.
Yeah, well, actually, I have seen some of the stuff when I went to on set visits. Saw in Chicago for Dark Knight, they had the Joker costume and the Batman's new costume that he had for that film. I've seen stuff they've had out on display at press junkets for those films. And also at Comic-Con, not this past year, but the year before last, they had, during the Batman 75 stuff, they had a lot of the stuff they brought in from, I don't want to say a lot, but they had several things from the exhibit, costumes and so forth. But I'm sure it's nothing like seeing it at Warner Brothers Studios.
Yeah, I mean, and having it all there. But you're right, they did tour with some of it, which was super cool. And the other thing they had that most people I don't even think saw is they have the glider wings from Batman Returns.
Okay.
And they're kind of, but they're up on the ceiling. So I think that if people don't look up, they just miss them. So that was kind of a cool thing as well. So yeah, like that was kind of the first really big Batman thing, was just all those Bat vehicles together in one large space. I actually, I asked if I'm getting married soon. I asked if I could have my reception in there, and they said it didn't work out, but maybe that's for the best, because I didn't actually ask permission from my fiance for that. I just was like, if this can happen, we're gonna make it happen.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
So that was super cool. And then they've got their permanent museum that they've got on the lot, which is also usually kind of a big part of the tour. The whole second floor has been Harry Potter for years, and then previously the first floor was kind of rotating in and out, just a variety of Warner Brothers props and costumes, but then Batman took over the entire bottom floor last year, and it's still that way today. So again, it's costumes and props from every film from 89 to, well, originally to Dark Knight Rises, and then they just added some elements from Batman v Superman. So they've got the major costumes from every film. They've got some of the model Batmobiles that they used for some of the shots. They've got, they've got concept art. They've got, the Shrek's department store cat head that is on top of his department store, but the miniature. They've got the bomb that Bane used to blow up, or to try to blow up Gotham in The Dark Knight Rises. They've got Ra's al Ghul's throne. So they pack a lot of stuff from all of the films into this museum floor, and it's so much that you could just spend a ton of time, especially for guys like us who can't get enough of it. You want to see every little thing. They've got the little cobra flower from Batman and Robin. Again, something really random that they dug out for this, which was super cool. And then again, in the fall, I think right around the time they got the new Batmobile, they got the three costumes from Batman v Superman, the ones that people may have seen at Comic-Con or at other trade shows, but then they kind of found their new home here in the Warner Brothers lot. So you've got the Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman costumes right there as you walk in. So it's kind of cool that you walk in and you've got the latest and greatest, and it's almost like you walk back in time, because then it's like the Dark Knight trilogy is the next, and then the further back you go, the more it kind of goes back to the old Burton Schumacher films. So tons of cool stuff in there. Of course, it's great to hear about it, but if for anybody who wants to actually see some of it, it is on the video, the Holy Batcast video on YouTube.
I've seen the villain costumes from the Dark Knight trilogy. I think I've seen all of them in person, but I've never. One of the reasons I did want to try to make it out there is I wanted to see the stuff from the Burton Schumacher films. Was there any of the villain costumes from those four films stood out to you as far as one you liked a lot or thought it was really cool to see in person?
I mean, they were all really cool to see in person. Again, like, even if you don't like the movies, you see the costumes and you go, that's still really cool. Like the Mr. Freeze costume, as ridiculous and over the top it is, it's still pretty cool to see in person. The one that really sticks out though is I'm a big Robin fan, like just in general the character, and the Robin costume from Batman Forever is really cool in person. Like you're like, it's actually a really good costume. So it is cool to see all of them. They've got the Catwoman costume from Batman Returns set up in a very Catwoman-y pose, like in her own case. So that was pretty cool too. The one they had the least stuff of was Batman 89, unfortunately. And I don't know if it's just because it's the oldest or if it's because that was all shot in London, so less of it made its way back to the States. I'm not sure, but that had the least, unfortunately. But even that, you got to see the Nicholson Joker outfit, which was great, and they dug out as much as they could. But again, even those over the top Schumacher stuff are pretty neat to look at with 20 years of hindsight and just to see it in person.
How are the two Keaton costumes, Batman costumes? How are they holding up?
Really well, actually. They have the costumes themselves, the ones they've got on display, are holding up and they look pretty good. You're seeing a little bit of deterioration of the rubber or whatever it was made of. There's a huge case that has all the cowls, and it has all the cowls from 89 through Dark Knight Rises. And the older cowls have seen better days, sadly, so they're still in there because they're, they put them on display, but some of them you're like, oh, it's a shame, because some of the Keaton ones, especially because they're so 25 plus years old now, they're the ears are starting to curl and the area kind of around his chin is starting to deteriorate, which is a shame, but I guess it's to be expected when you're making it out of those materials. So the suits, I think all the suits are holding up really well. They've done a great job preserving them, but a lot of the cowls have, those were a little more beat up, I think, from usage.
How does the Batman v Superman the Batman costume, how does it, when you see it in person, I haven't seen it in person yet, how does it compare to, let's say, the ones from Nolan's films? I know it's a different look completely, but can you tell a difference production-wise, how they were constructed? Is there a big difference there?
Yeah, well, there definitely is. What's so interesting is, the Nolan ones are still kind of armored, it's kind of, especially Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises is kind of those segmented armor pieces over some sort of, not underwear, but you know what I mean, like something underneath it. Whereas this is it all appears to be one piece. The tour guide did tell us that it was 3D printed, so it was designed and then printed. So it does give it a really different texture than I think we have ever seen before, which makes it a really interesting kind of, it's not quite cloth, but it's not quite armor, but it's not quite rubber. It's like this really unique material all its own, which I think is fitting for Batman because it can't just be spandex, but this is a nice kind of middle ground of all of those. So it's interesting how it all is one piece. I can only imagine how easy or hard it was to get in and out of it, especially because as it's displayed, you can't see the seams. I imagine it's in the back, that it zips up and down in the back where the cape is, but you can't see that. So you're like, wow, like how hard was this to get in and out of? But I will say that when you get a great look at the new Batman costume specifically, you really get a chance to check out those details. So you get to see the belt that has pretty considerable compartments in that utility belt, and the brass knuckles that we now know are part of the new suit. You get to see them, and that was kind of a really cool idea on the part of Zack Snyder and the costume designer to add that little element that you're like, oh, that would kind of make sense. Gives him just a little bit of edge over the bad guys and doesn't call attention to itself. Kind of clever, things like that. And the boots and everything. And the Batman costume has great detailing and stuff, but I think that you could even enjoy more of the detailing on the Superman and especially the Wonder Woman costumes because there are different, they're like small glyphs and writing throughout both of those costumes that you kind of get up really close and you're like, wow, this thing is just so detailed. So yeah, I could have spent all my time in the museum just with the new costumes, but then I had to remind myself that there was hundreds more right behind it, and I had to divvy up my time accordingly. But yeah, I mean, the new suit, I mean, it looks great on film, but it looks great in person too, and it's pretty awesome.
How did the new Batmobile compare to the previous versions in person? I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a badass
looks like a
car.
Batmobile?
Yeah, it looks like a Batmobile. I like the approach they went with it. I was lucky enough to be there when the Batmobile arrived, which was super cool. So I have some friends over there, and they were like, "Hey, come over this afternoon and hang out for a bit," like that kind of thing. And and so we got to see them drive it up. So it was cool because he revved the engine for us, and you got to see the cockpit open, the doors go up and swing up and everything. Again, it looks awesome. It looks powerful. I like that it looks functional, but it still very much has a Batmobile motif. One thing I noticed kind of looking at it, though, is like there's a lot going on. And so I think that you're going to see this car do a lot of stuff that we haven't seen yet, which everybody kind of speculated. But looking at it, you're like, I see pistons under the fins in the back, and I see things that look like they pop up from the hood, and things like that where I'm like,
Well, I was told that it does. I don't want to know what it does extra because I don't want to be spoiled, but I think there are some surprises with the Batmobile. Well, let me finish up and let me just ask you about Batman v Superman in general. We've had 3 trailers this year. We've had a lot of publicity stuff as far as pictures, a lot of Batman. One of the publicity pictures were Ben Affleck as Batman. What's your real quick, what's your general take on BVS? Are you looking forward to it and so forth?
Oh, man, I'm counting down to it. I can't wait for this movie. And I think that all the Batman stuff, for me, has all been really spot on. Like, I love all the new stuff that we're seeing, the look of everything. I love the new Batsuit. I love the new Batmobile. I love the way he moves in the trailer. Like, Batman moves quick and mean the way he should, like that we've never really quite seen on film that way. And that's not to take anything away from the previous films, because I love most of them. But it's amazing how it's evolved, that we're getting a Batman like this that truly looks like he jumped off the page more than we've ever seen before. But in addition to just the kind of surface level, he looks great stuff, with each new trailer, we get another snippet of dialogue, or we get another little indication as far as the storyline, or where Bruce is coming from, or what his relationship is with Alfred, or what his relationship is with Clark, things like that. And with every little piece of story information that we're getting, I just keep feeling better and better about the movie. I like everybody, I had some concerns. I mean, I tend to be more optimistic than many when it came to this film, especially. But at the same time, I was still like, oh well, I just hope that they don't make him an a-hole. I hope they don't, make the whole world like hate Superman. And like there were just certain things where I'm like, oh, I just hope they don't go too far with this or that and the other thing. And then with each little line, you kind of go, wow, okay, this has been really well thought out. Like they really know where Bruce is coming from. So even if he's, you've got to have him not trust Superman for this movie to work. So even if he doesn't trust Superman, and we as the audience knows that he should trust Superman, you still, with everything that we're seeing and hearing, you understand why he doesn't. And that's the important thing, is just being able to understand where he's coming from. And again, just the little things that we're seeing from the trailers and the dialogue, it seems like they've really kind of nailed that. So I'm excited to see Batman on screen as always, but what I'm really excited about is this new characterization of Batman that seems very faithful, very true to the character. Like, I'll give you an example. I love the fact that Alfred is like, hey, dumbass, this guy's not our enemy. Don't go to war. You can't win this. I love that. And I love Bruce, who is a stubborn SOB, always has been. How he's like, no, he brought the war to us. I'm just stepping up to fight it. And it's like, that's a very kind of Alfred and Bruce point of view in this. Is like Alfred is the voice of reason, and sadly it takes a little longer for Bruce to put his pride aside to listen, because he can be pigheaded, because he believes in what he believes. And so there are things like that, the dynamics that I'm seeing in these trailers, that just has me thrilled about the film. So honestly, everything that I've seen, I'm extremely happy with. I know that the last trailer did not get universal love, which I think is a shame, because I thought it was really good. I listened to your guys talk about it, which was super fun, and I talked about it on my own show, but I get the perspective of, I wish they had held certain things back. I get that, and I can't blame anyone for that, because as people who were sold on this film from a logo, we didn't need any of it.
No, exactly.
So there is a thrill to seeing it for the first time when you're in the theater, but at the same time, I'm like, yeah, but it was still really cool. So I'm not going to be throwing tomatoes at them because they showed me more stuff. So for me, I'm thrilled about the movie. I think it looks great. I'm counting down. Now that Christmas is over, we're getting just so close, and it's I think we just slipped under the 90-day mark.
Yeah, I was about to say, I was looking right here at the countdown where the clock is ticking. We're less than just a day shy of 3 months. So I mean, it'll be here before you know it. So what I usually tell folks is, enjoy this part right here, because once the movie's here, it's here and gone. But it's getting up here, getting very close. So let's plug some stuff. Andy, what website, podcast, anything else you got going on you want the listeners to know about?
Yeah, sure. I think Holy Batcast, like if you love lots of Batman talk about a lot of different subjects, so of course we talk Batman v Superman as much as we can, but we look back at the older films, and we look back at the cartoons, we look back at we look at toys or the comic books and things like that. So we try to do mix it up, but it's always about Batman all the time, and we do an episode every 2 to 3 weeks, depending on schedules. So, check out Holy Batcast, and then also go to YouTube and check out the Holy Batcast web series. We've got one episode of the web series. We've also got me and my fiance's reaction to the trailer, which way more people watched than I thought would, which I was a little, it was just strange to me, because a friend of mine was like, you should do one of those. And I'm like, nobody needs to watch that. But people watch it. God bless them. So check out the Holy Batcast YouTube page. Check out the Holy Batcast podcast, and then just follow Twitter, Holy Batcast.
All right, very good. Thanks for coming on and sharing your experience at the tour. It was awesome. Had to be awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome, and my pleasure, Bill. Anytime.
All right, in this next segment of the end of year 2015 Batman on Film podcast, we're going to talk a little Batman in comics and some other stuff as well. And I have a old school BOFer who used to be on some of the older podcasts. He's written for Batman on Film for a long time. Good guy, good friend, Chris Clow. How you doing, Chris?
Doing all right, man. How are you?
I'm doing good. So let's start off and talk about The Dark Knight 3, The Master Race. And we only had 2 issues so far to really talk about. But and just heads up, we may talk some spoilers. So if you haven't read and you plan on reading, you may just want to jump past this little short segment. But what's your overall take on the story based on these first 2 issues?
Well, so far it's a hell of a lot better than the second one.
Oh yeah.
What I think I really like, and I wasn't expecting to like this very much, but the move to Andy Kubert as the main artist has been very satisfying, because in a way he's modified his regular style a little bit so that he actually evokes old school Frank Miller. Because I mean, as anyone who has eyeballs can see, who read Dark Knight Returns and then read Dark Knight Strikes Again, Miller's style changed a lot. And it was almost unrecognizable. I mean, you could see traces of the rugged edges that he's always been known for. But his style is very different between Dark Knight 1 and Dark Knight 2. In Dark Knight 3, Andy Kubert is going to a place effectively enough that he's able to sort of bring back the same kind of artistic style that Miller was using in the original one. And that adds an entirely other feeling of authenticity to this one that the second one, frankly, didn't have, at least from my perspective.
Yeah.
And from the story's perspective, I mean, it feels authentic in that regard, too. I mean, I've always really admired Brian Azzarello, and the way that I understand that it works is that Miller has advised on the direction of the story, but it's Azzarello who's actually writing the scripts. And, you know, a lot of people have compared Miller to Azzarello for a while, and Azzarello to Miller, I should say, because they're both they both get to the heart of brutality in a lot of ways. And you can sort of see that going in Dark Knight 3, but they're not pushing things too hard, at least not yet. Spoiler alert, but I was pretty sad that Ray Palmer got stepped on in the most recent issue.
Yeah.
But, I mean, other than that, I'm actually enjoying it quite a bit so far. And I wasn't exactly open to the idea of a third one anyway when it was first announced. So, to me, it's actually a pretty fun read so far, but I'm cautiously optimistic. You know, I'm not completely sold on the idea that this is going to be a knockdown, drag-out, awesome story that could lead to the same reputation as the original one. But they're doing pretty good so far, so that's fine with me.
I really like the way that Azzarello has written Carrie Kelly in these first two issues.
Yeah.
And I even said in my review of issue 2 that you can see why Carrie is kind of Bruce's favorite in a way in this universe, because she's a lot like him. You know, she's a little badass. She knows how to lie when she has to lie, and so forth. So I thought the whole, you know, between her experience in issue 1 when she's actually going around as Batman and then getting caught by the police, and then her whole escape was just very well written, very well done.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, Carrie Kelly is definitely one of the most iconic things that ever came out of the original Dark Knight story. People love Carrie Kelly, and for good reason. So when I was reading the second issue and seeing the sort of verbal sparring between she and Commissioner Yindel, there was a lot of fun there that I wasn't expecting, but there was also quite a bit of somberness overall when she started to actually talk about Bruce Wayne. And, of course, that story is probably not even true, but you could tell that the way in which she was telling that story, and eventually, you know, later on in the issue when she was actually thinking about her real conversation with Bruce Wayne, I mean, she respects that guy a lot. And that's the thing that I'm probably looking most forward to seeing in Dark Knight 3 is that brutally experienced old war veteran Bruce Wayne that, you know, that we sort of got in Dark Knight Strikes Again. They definitely tried to push the brutality forward quite a bit.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it was to the point of unrecognizability with the Batman that we already know so well in other places. And I think Azzarello, one of his greatest contributions could potentially be bringing things back to the middle a little bit and showing us a Batman that's familiar, but also one who has no hesitation whatsoever for putting people in traction.
Absolutely. Well, we got, 6 issues left, so looking forward to seeing where that goes. Yeah. We'll have to talk about that next year once it comes to completion. So let's talk about another Batman, the Batman in the DCU proper. And right now, it's not Bruce Wayne. It's been, for almost a year, it's been Jim Gordon. So I only read Batman, and you know, that's the flagship title, and that's really where that whole story is coming from, because it is Scott Snyder's idea to do this. How has Jim Gordon as Batman affected the other Bat books, and how has his Batman infiltrated the entire DC comic book universe?
Well, you know, I think that Gordon as Batman is a primary example of what is happening to the whole publication line, because, you know, they've also shaken up Superman quite a bit. They've shaken up Green Lantern quite a bit. It's like they're at the forefront right now of really kind of fundamentally trying to change the fabric of the DC universe. So Gordon as Batman, I mean, anyone who's read Snyder's issues when we actually saw Gordon first suit up, I mean, Gordon himself said that this was the worst idea in the history of Gotham City.
Mm-hmm.
And it could have potentially been that, and I think really in the hands of any other primary writer, it likely would have been that. But Scott Snyder has a way of getting to the heart of what people love about the certain characters. In his main Batman run, one of the things that I was always really happy about with the way that Snyder wrote it was that he even knew that Batman himself wasn't an honest narrator, because he's so guarded and he always puts his feelings on hold so much until they get slammed in the face, as we saw with the Joker in the most recent story. So it's very different with Jim Gordon, because Gordon is a guy who's in touch with himself. Gordon is a guy who knows who he is, and he's thrust into this really strange role. Really, I mein, in a giant bat robot suit, I mean, that's going to be weird to anybody. But Snyder, I think because it was his idea, he's bringing a level of humanity to it that probably wouldn't have been there had this been in the hands of another writer. So, as far as the DC universe is concerned, I mean, it's disruptive because people know that it's not Bruce Wayne, or people know that it's not the proper Batman, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
And that's to be expected, but, we're also starting to see hints now of the road to Bruce Wayne's ultimate return to Batman, because we all know he's going to get there. And this was sort of the same kind of will he, won't he type of thing that was happening during Grant Morrison's Batman run. It was very different, obviously, and you and I had some pretty different opinions about that.
Yeah.
But, I mean, this one, putting Jim Gordon in the suit is a very different way of doing it. He's not a typical suspect for who you think would be Batman. And, I mean, the thing that I always come back to when ships like this happen is that they're temporary, So we might as well enjoy the ride. If it's really not your cup of tea, then no one is compelling you to plunk down $4 to $5 every month to check out the issues of Batman. But, I mean, if you do decide to come along for the ride, then chances are things will at the very least be interesting. But the minute they stop being interesting, just stop buying the book. And then when you find out that Bruce Wayne is coming back, pick it up again. I mean, that's how this stuff works. Yeah. We vote with our wallets on these things. So the way that the story is progressing, at least because I haven't read the most recent issue, but for where things were at the last time I read it, and I actually talked with John Beerley about this the other day, and he kind of feels similarly to me that in the hands of another writer, this would probably be an abject failure, but it's actually pretty interesting in the hands of Scott Snyder.
Well, let me ask you this. You brought up John, and I was going to, that's where I was headed. John was on last week, and since he reviews Batman, he brought up the point, we talked about Endgame, and we talked about, of course, Super Heavy, but he felt that they could have kept the mystery of where Bruce was going a little bit longer, and it was basically instantaneous. We knew that Bruce somehow survived, even at the last issue when Endgame came to a conclusion. What's your thoughts on that?
I don't disagree with that, but it seems like DC is always nervous to hint at the possibility that Bruce Wayne might be absent for anything longer than a month. I mean, this goes back to Final Crisis. Final Crisis number 6, we saw that he looked like he was dead. His burnt-out husk of a corpse was in Superman's arms. And, they could have let that go for almost a year, almost a full year before we actually got the real idea of what was going on. But instead, in the very next issue, they show us that Bruce Wayne is alive in the past. So, I mean, I think it's a systemic thing of behavior, that I think they're nervous to hint at that possibility if it means losing regular readers. Because if Bruce Wayne is gone, then that's the reason that a lot of these people come to the party in the first place. So I think it's much more of a business reason than a creative one. Because if it was strictly driven by creativity, then John is absolutely right. that moment could have been much larger than it actually was. But that's always been the problem with monthly comics, is that the brand has to be served first. And that's what has pushed a lot of really good writers away from telling stories about these great characters, is that stuff is getting in the way more now than it seemed like it did in the past. Mark Waid told me at a convention one time that he thinks that he's in exile from DC and specifically from writing Superman because he was vocal about some of the directions that they were taking. And that's sad because he's an excellent writer and he's probably the biggest Superman fan on the planet. And that's saying something coming from a guy who thinks that he's one of the biggest Superman fans on the planet. So, I mean, it's one of those things where the vision of the writer is likely interrupted by the people in the boardroom, and that's okay. I mean, it serves an ultimate purpose. You don't want Bruce Wayne to get too far away from what's going on in Gotham City or what's going on in the regular Batman title. But I think John's right. If they had waited a little bit longer to give us a little bit of a payoff as far as where Bruce is and what he's up to, then it probably would have been a more emotional moment. Absolutely.
What do you think about Endgame, which I loved Endgame, and it was billed as kind of like the ultimate Batman Joker showdown story, like the definitive. And I don't know if I want to use definitive, but maybe final confrontation, you know, is what it's kind of billed as. But we know it's not going to be the case. Do you think Endgame, or do you think Super Heavy takes anything away from the ending of Endgame?
Not really. I mean, because in the context of Endgame by itself, I think you're absolutely right in saying that it is a definitive confrontation of Batman versus the Joker, but in a specific context. Because, I mean, one of the other things that comic book fans and indeed comic book writers have to deal with on a regular basis is that, you know, they're temporary stewards of these characters. So it's specifically in the context of Scott Snyder's run on Batman, Endgame is the definitive confrontation between Batman and the Joker. This is what he has concocted to, and I think he's even said this on the record, this is what he's concocted to sort of give a send-off to his iterations of writing the Joker.
Yeah.
And in that sense, the ideas that it laid down about the Joker and immortality really, I mean, it definitely got my attention, because that is, at least to my knowledge, has never been significantly explored.
Yeah, what did you think about all that?
It was definitely interesting. I mean, I think that, you know, they backpedaled on it quite a bit by the end of the story, but, you know, in a way, if you're thinking about, because a lot of time travel stories, for instance, and we're getting into heavy comic book territory here if we're talking time travel and the Joker, but time travel stories, one of the things that they do on a pretty regular basis is say that because time flows like a river, it always sort of rights itself. You know, you can try and change some things, but you can't actually affect the current of the river because it's always going to be designed to flow in a particular direction. And the idea that the Joker might have been some kind of force in Gotham City that has always existed, or at least has existed for a very long time, there's an element of destiny to that definitely adds a little bit of grandeur to the Joker overall. And again, you know, in the hands of another writer, that might have seemed hammy. But in the hands of Scott Snyder, he's so effective at making the Joker terrifying that it feels natural. And it doesn't feel like, you know, you don't have the little continuity bug in your brain going, wait a second, this doesn't seem right. Instead, you're just, it's a little bit easier to get taken along for the ride that he wants to take us on. And so it was very unusual, that's for sure. And I'm not sure if I'm necessarily on board with the idea of that becoming complete canon within the DC universe. But Snyder's success means that he can pretty well dictate where the book is going to go. And by taking things in that direction, he definitely took us to an unexpected place. And that's a hard thing to do for a character that's been around for more than 75 years in multiple mediums. So if I can get something new out of a Batman story that I wasn't expecting, then that's a pretty solid experience from my perspective. So I was pretty on board with it, but I'm not sure if I would like to see it explored significantly by other writers, because it probably wouldn't be as good if it was.
Do you think that how do you, this is looking forward because we don't know, but we know that, Bruce is coming back. I mean, that's not a spoiler. It's just, DC's even, in their solicitations, is said as much.
Right.
But how do you think Gordon's stint as Batman will affect his relationship with the Bruce Wayne Batman once things go back to quote unquote status quo?
Well, if we're talking specifically status quo, then there's a lot of notions that come with that as far as what we expect from Batman and Gordon. If anything, and particularly in the hands of Scott Snyder, it could potentially make them more effective partners, because Gordon will have, at least in some sense, sort of
walk in his shoes.
Exactly. Yeah. And for all of his bluster and for all of the building up that Bruce Wayne does to try and keep a lot of people out, Gordon has never been really part of that. He's always Gordon has always been a welcome addition to Batman's stable of allies, and one of the best allies, not just because of his position in the police department, but because of the kind of man he is. And yeah, if anything, I just think that it could potentially bring them closer together, and maybe on the same page a little bit more as far as how they can continue to help Gotham in the future. So, that would seem natural to me. Of course, they might take it in an entirely different direction, like, I don't know, a la Nightfall or something like that. But Gordon has never really gotten on Batman's bad side for very long. And I don't think that this is going to put Gordon on Batman's bad side whatsoever. I think it's just going to strengthen their bond.
Yeah, real quick, before I want to move on to Arkham Knight, we can change gears, go to video games. But what was your highlight? Batman in Comics 2015, what was your highlight?
Endgame, by far.
Yeah.
Okay. Anytime it's Batman versus the Joker, I'm always going to be paying much more attention. And there are plenty of villains that I love, maybe as much as the Joker. I really love Mr. Freeze, although New 52 Mr. Freeze I'm not crazy about, but I still have a lot of love for Freeze. But no, anytime that you're going to pair Batman and the Joker in sort of a prestigious setting, where there's a lot of stakes on either side, and where Joker really gets underneath Batman's skin. That's one of the cool parts about modern Batman stories, is the Joker is so singularly effective at affecting Bruce Wayne's emotions, and because oftentimes Batman denies that he has them. And when the Joker reminds him that, oh, you're wrong, and here's why, then I always really enjoy that stuff. So Endgame for me was definitely a highlight, and I was pretty numb by the time I read that last issue, because that, maybe not quite in the same place as I was when I read Final Crisis number 6, because I was really bought into what Morrison was doing with that. But the idea that they could both be gone, and that other supporting characters were so committed to the idea that they both could be gone, that definitely got to me. So Endgame was a definite highlight.
I would agree. That was my highlight for his comic book, Wise Batman, this past year. So let's talk about Arkham Knight. I had Ryan Haas on not long ago. He reviewed the game. He played it to 100% completion. So he waited till he got to 100% and then did the review. And really loved the game. I'm playing it now. I'm stuck at one part.
Oh.
And then I got into the Uncharted trilogy for PlayStation 4, and then I got mixed up with that and got obsessed with that. So I went through all three of those, and now I'm about to go back to Arkham Knight. But all right, Chris, tell me what you think about that video game, and do you think it's really going to be the last one of that universe?
To answer that, no. Because the world that Rocksteady helped create is far too populated and has become far too much of a hit for them to leave it alone. Now, it could probably be picked up by a different studio, but it'll probably still take place within that universe. I mean, they've built a lot out of this universe with comics,
absolutely,
and with multiple games and with direct-to-video movies and all of these things.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't think we've seen the last of this world. But as far as what I thought about the game, and I reviewed it.
Well, real quick, let me ask
sure.
you this, because you brought that up. You know, Ryan thought there's a possibility of there's a lot of time in between Arkham Origins and Arkham Asylum,
right?
That they could go that route. Would you agree with that?
That's what I would want to see. I mean, if I had my druthers, then it would be a Dick Grayson origin story. I think that would be an awesome thing to devote to a game. And you know, I'm one of these Robin apologists that actually really enjoys the dynamic that Robin and Nightwing bring to the overall team, and you know, Batgirl as well, and potentially the Red Hood, which you know is even, it seems more plausible now with Arkham Knight having come out. But no, I would love to see Bruce find Dick Grayson and train him up, and maybe get a chance to get behind the Mask of Robin in one of these games a little bit more.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it'd definitely be fun, I think. But in regards to Arkham Knight, and I reviewed it when it first came out for a website I was writing for at the time, I think it's the definitive Batman video game. The other games were the definitive Batman games based on the technology at the time, but by adding the car to the mix, there's not really much more that you can add to the premise of being Batman.
So you wouldn't agree with the criticism, and this is not mine. This is just what I've seen online, that there was too much Batmobile at times in the game, or no?
Well, you know, and I think you and I would agree on this. I mean, the car has always been a very important part of Batman's arsenal, you know?
Yeah.
So if he has access to it when he's in a part of the city, it makes sense to me that he would use it a lot. Especially if, you know, if things like the Arkham Knight's militia and Deathstroke are coming after him with giant friggin' tanks, you know? I mean, I've heard those criticisms as well, and I don't really share them, just because, you know, those the previous games in this series didn't have any of the car, and by giving us a really solid chance to get behind the wheel of a really cool version of the Batmobile, I've been totally fine with it. I mean, the Batmobile has always been, you know, lockstep with Batman as far as the iconic gear and the iconic status of the character. So I don't think that there was too much Batmobile. I was fine with driving it around, and I thought that those Riddler challenges were really fun. I had fun with the Batmobile. If other people didn't, then that's too bad, but I certainly did.
What did you think about, and let me just throw out a spoiler warning, I know that there's like, 2-3 different endings. It depends on how, you know, what completion level you get to.
Yeah.
And there is the real, I guess the real ending, and that's been online, and I've seen it. What's your thoughts on that?
It was oddly Christopher Nolan-esque, I thought.
Yeah.
But you know, that's all right. I mean, the ambiguity was fine. I think the first time I got to that ending, I was a little befuddled, because they normally are a little bit more definitive with the endings that they put out.
Yeah. So you hadn't seen it before you got to that part? No. You saw it on the video?
I saw it by getting to 100% on the regular game, and then I got to 100% in Nightmare mode and saw it again. But that being said, I haven't finished the new Most Wanted missions, and I heard that might throw a couple of wrenches into the mix. So, I mean, some people might have finished those already. I haven't had the chance, but I mean, it's...
What did you think? Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. It's I mean, it's interesting in the sense that it proposes that the legend of Batman continues, but in an unconventional way. I mean, the thing that I just read into immediately was that, well, he's probably using, either he or someone in the organization is probably using a more mild version of Scarecrow's fear toxin, so that people are going to be completely messed up in the head when they encounter quote-unquote Batman. And that seems like the most practical application of the ending that we saw, at least to me. But, I mean, as far as the story that the game told, though, I mean, it probably wasn't quite as strong or as tight as Arkham City's, and you know, that, granted, that was written by Paul Dini, so that's, you know, he's Paul friggin' Dini. But I still thought that it was a pretty effective exploration of the characters, and I thought it was awesome to be able to play with both Robin and Nightwing in dual play scenarios. So, I mean, I'm still... It's been 6 months since that game has come out, and I'm still playing it on a pretty regular basis. There have been a ton of other games that have come out over the last couple months. You know, Call of Duty Black Ops 3, the Uncharted trilogy, which I also got because I love those games, and you know, Star Wars Battlefront and all of these things. But Arkham Knight is always one that I go back to because you can be the Batman.
What do you think about all of the DLC stuff that comes with this game? Is it, if someone was listening and hasn't partaken in any of it, is it something that's worth investing your money and time into it, or what would be your recommendation?
If you could get the season pass on a discount, then I would say absolutely. By retailing it for $40, I think that's pushing it. Just because, I mean, you don't want to have to pay for a game twice. And that's kind of what a lot of these game publishers are doing. Like, people who play Call of Duty, you have to pay $50 to get a season pass, and I just think that's ridiculous. And Arkham Knights retails for $40. There is a fair amount of material in it, though. And, you know, from the Batgirl Matter of Family prequel story that sort of takes place before Arkham Asylum, to a couple of the other smaller episodes with guys like Robin and Nightwing and Catwoman. The Batgirl DLC was definitely the longest of all of the stuff that's released so far. But I mean, it's fun playing with Robin and Nightwing, especially for Batman fans. You know, it's always good to get behind the mask of Robin and see what Nightwing. The Nightwing extra mission was hilarious too, because it had Dick Grayson's sense of humor on full display, which I love. You know, hey boss, Nightwing's up here and we just got our asses kicked. Penguin knows immediately that it's Nightwing. It's like, oh, yo. So I love that kind of stuff. Now, the Most Wanted missions are definitely probably the centerpiece of all the DLC released so far, but also the Batmobiles that you get to drive are pretty great. The 60s car, the 2016 car, the Tumbler, the 89 car. It's pretty awesome to be able to drive those around. So your mileage may vary depending on how of a Batman fan you are. But, I mean, like, I think on Xbox Live right now, and probably on PlayStation Network, too, the season pass is like $25. It's worth it at that price, I would say.
Okay. Awesome. All right, let's move on to our last topic. Let's leave comic books and video games behind. There is another installment of Batman on Film coming in about 3 months exactly. It's called Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice.
Oh, really?
And this last year, I guess really because of the way the film is being released in March, this year has been, I mean, you've got all 3 trailers for the film in 1 year, you know, spread throughout. So there have been 3 trailers. There's been a lot of publicity stills. There's been stuff coming out, different set visits from different magazines and so forth. So just right now, what's your anticipation level for the film, and what did you think about the trailers? Did you have a trailer that you liked more than others, or was there one you didn't like? So just general thoughts about this project.
Well, let me put it in context. So you know, and probably a lot of people who have read stuff of mine on BOF know that I'm also a big Superman fan. I mean, as far as my 2 favorite fictional characters are concerned, it's Batman and Superman, hands down.
Yeah.
So I've been waiting for this movie my entire life, basically.
Okay.
You know, the Justice League is a unit that I have always greatly enjoyed because those are the world's greatest superheroes as far as I'm concerned. And this is the first step toward that. So, you know, I've been looking forward to Batman v Superman, I mean, pretty much ever since you first reported that it might happen in 2002, and it got a green light for a 2004 release, and then it got canceled after that. I mean, it's hard to complain after, you know, what we got from 2005 to 2012.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I was always sort of bothered by the fact that we never got that movie, and now that we have it coming, it's very exciting for me. I probably liked the second trailer a little bit more than the third, but the third one had the best part of all of them when Bruce Wayne and Clark Kent were talking at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
We've just had a bad history with freaks dressed like clowns. It was one of the single best lines I've probably seen ever written between Bruce Wayne and Clark Kent. So I'm really looking forward to that. I don't get on the Affleck hate train as much as a lot of other people do. I think as soon as
that's kind of died down a little bit.
Oh yeah, I think so. But I mean, there's still some that don't pay as much attention as you or I or other people who read BOF on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Who are still like, oh, he was Daredevil, and it's just sort of, did you see The Town? Did you see Argo? I mean, he's not the same actor that he was 12 years ago. And, I mean, as soon as he was cast, though, I was pretty much on board with it. Because it's plausible to me that, you could go to TMZ.com and see Ben Affleck's face in a drunken stupor under a headline that says, Bruce Wayne at it again. So, I mean, that stuff never bothered me. But at the same time, too, they're going with the more sure of himself and assertive and brutal kind of Batman that was closer to how he was in The Dark Knight Returns. And that
it's Bale's version, the Dark Knight trilogy, that kind of hit home for me. That was kind of like my Batman, my version of Batman. But I wrote something, I don't know, a year ago probably. It's been a long time since they started filming this thing, you know. But Affleck is probably the most physically suited actor to play Batman than they've ever had. Absolutely. I mean, the dude he's 6'3", 6'4". He looks like a comic book Bruce Wayne, and I wanted him to replace Nolan as director, and I always thought if he did, which it looks like he's going to, that he would cast himself as Batman. So, yeah, I'm with you. I've never been one who had a meltdown or was upset. I thought it was just great casting myself. I could see past all the bullshit that came with, he made Geely and this and that and all this other nonsense. You're right. He's not the same guy as he was 10, 15 years ago.
No, absolutely not. And I mean, there's really no reason not to at least be, at the very least, interested in what he's going to do as Batman. So, it's even the costume, such a pretty fundamental departure from what the movies have done for the prior 20, 25 years. I mean, it's just they're going into a direction that looks like it's trying to evoke the comics a bit more. But I mean, my whole thing is that, a great template for the newer movies is the Arkham games, because the Arkham games have one step in the comics and one step in the real world. The Nolan movies had both steps in the real world,
Absolutely.
And that worked well exactly for the kind of stories that Christopher Nolan wanted to tell. But if you're going to take a step closer to the comic book roots of Batman, then that seems like a very balanced and potentially very crowd-pleasing approach, so that we can get villains like Killer Croc, who we'll see in Suicide Squad. So we can potentially get villains like Mr. Freeze getting their due on film, So I mean, I don't really think there's too much not to get excited about. I mean, there's always the potential that it's going to crash and burn, but it's an Oscar-winning screenwriter, so that potential is lower. I really like Chris Terrio, and I like the things that he said. I mean, he seems like he has a very good demeanor for structure and for things to make sense. And, people who were really pissed off about the way that Man of Steel ended, this movie has a great sense of consequence. Bruce Wayne was in Metropolis that day. That's a pretty awesome thread to go off of, I think. And as someone who didn't hate Man of Steel by any means, I actually rather enjoyed it.
I did too, yeah.
I mean, it seems like that's the perfect jumping on point to potentially bring Batman into the mix for what's going to be a larger DC universe. So I know that there are a lot of Batman-only fans that have reservations about Batman interacting with these superpowered beings, but, we'll see how it goes, but Batman's strength in the Justice League has never been because he's going to be able to punch Darkseid in the face. It's because he knows who's coming from which direction and can tell Superman when he can punch Darkseid in the face. You know, he's always been the master tactician, and this movie looks like it's going to get pretty close to the heart of who Batman is supposed to be. He's not trying to face off against Superman in his regular suit. We've seen that suit before, and last time he wore it in the comics, it went pretty well for him. So, you know, we'll see what happens. I think there's plenty to look forward to. Absolutely.
Very well. So, before we go, plug something. Twitter, anything else you got going, any articles, any websites, anything you got going?
Yeah.
Let it rip right now.
Sure, yeah. So I'm on Twitter at Chris Clow, and I actually recently started up a podcast called Comics on Consoles that looks at comic book-based video games. The most recent episode, I just did a little quickfire one about the canceled Daredevil game from 2004 that was fun. But biggest episode so far has been about Aquaman Battle for Atlantis, which by all accounts is one of the shittiest superhero games ever made. But I tried to find out a little bit more about it, and particularly about the people that made it. And it's a pretty interesting story to see how the experience of working on that game has affected them. So you can find that comicsonconsoles.podbean.com. You can find it on iTunes. I'd be honored if you listen to it. It's been a labor of love to put together, and I'll have the next episode of that out probably in the next couple of weeks.
Very good. Hey, thanks for coming on again, and let's make it more of a regular thing, and looking forward to talking to you in March when the film's out and see what you think.
Absolutely, Bill. I'm always happy to jump back onto BOF. It's one of my favorites and definitely one of my homes. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, up next on the Batman on Film podcast, the end-of-year podcast, is longtime BOF contributor Ryan Haas. How you doing, Ryan?
Hey, Bill. I'm doing good.
Okay. Ryan is on today to talk about the Arkham Knight video game that was released back in June. Ryan did a 100% completion review that was posted on Batman on Film a few weeks ago. If you're a gamer and you are a big fan of the game, it's a really good review that goes through the entire game. That's why it was 100% completion. So, Ryan, just before we get started here, what was your overall thoughts about the rollout and the delay, and then just the whole release itself when it finally hit the store shelves back this past summer?
Well, the whole hype surrounding Arkham Knight was gigantic. I mean, if you compare it, like, it's almost like the equivalent in the video game world is like The Dark Knight Rises a few years ago, because when the original game in this franchise came out, Batman Arkham Asylum, like, it was totally unexpected. People were blown away, but the game industry as a whole was just like, this is pretty revolutionary, especially for a licensed product. And so every game released in the series since then has been, you know, as good as you could hope for in terms of quality and story and everything. So they had hyped the Arkham Knight up so much that it was, this first major game like this on the next gen consoles, PlayStation 4 and Xbox One and stuff like that. And for the Batman fans, it's supposed to be a story that, like, ends the trilogy, ends this entire this part of the franchise, I guess. But the problem, there were a few problems and bumps along the way. The game did get delayed 2 or 3 times. There was a collector's edition that got announced with a Batmobile statue, and that got completely canceled like a week before release. And the most, but those things aren't too terrible. A lot of games, that happens to a lot of games, but the worst problem was the problems that happen with the PC release, and a lot of those problems still aren't fixed and still isn't the best way to go if you're wanting to play Arkham Knight. But if you can get your hands on it and can play it, on Xbox One or PlayStation 4, I would definitely recommend it. And overall, I thought it was an amazing game and an excellent closing chapter to the franchise.
Just real quick, compare how does it compare the on the PlayStation 3 compared to the PS4? It's just, I mean, I haven't looked at the older games in a while since I've been playing the PS4, but you can just tell that there was a dramatic difference in just the graphic quality and so forth. So anything else you can just talk about that?
Yeah, so like the original Arkham games on the previous generation consoles on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, they were on the Unreal Engine, so they looked great for the time, and they still hold up, honestly. But the developer Rocksteady still used their modified Unreal Engine for Arkham Knight on the next generation consoles. So it's just all of the next gen bells and whistles you're really waiting for are in the game. You've got like dynamic weather, and I think they've got the new hot thing right now is physically based rendering. I think they've got that, and just it does all these just insane like level of detail type things. Like when you first start playing the game and you see the Batmobile, it like goes out of its way to like zoom into the bolts on the tire tread and everything like that, just to make you see how next gen and awesome this game is. So, and it's the game is only available on next gen hardware.
Yeah.
So as opposed to a lot of games when these new consoles first came out, they also had to take the same game and down-res it or port it to the previous hardware. So they didn't have that restriction, so they could really go, and they had, 4 years to make it, so they had a lot of time to make the game look incredible. It's probably the best-looking game, I would say it's the best-looking game on either of those consoles, honestly. It's worth buying a console for.
Without giving away, I don't want to do, like, major spoilers for anybody who's hasn't played through it yet, like me. I'm stuck on one particular part with the Batmobile, but that's a different story. But what were some of the highlights of the game for you?
The highlights of the game. The story, I really enjoyed. It really wrapped up what you would expect and want. And all of the things it does with certain characters are just completely out of left field, but still amazing at the same time. The Scarecrow is incredible. I really, it's one of those things where you really can't talk too much about the story.
Yeah.
But it's amazing. It is absolutely amazing. And there's so many, I guess I can talk about this. There's so many little Easter eggs to 75 plus years of Batman history in there, and just little fun things like, since the Batmobile's in this game, you'll be in the GCPD and you walk out, you're Batman. They don't notice you at first because you're Batman, and then sometimes the cops will be surrounded around the Batmobile, like looking at it, like, oh my gosh, this is awesome! I can't believe it's here. And then when they notice you, they're like, oh, hey, Batman, and they'll just walk away. And then there's like a little scene where like there's a prisoner like making fun of you and stuff, and you can just walk up to him and grab him and like punch him through the bars and stuff. Little Easter egg things like that are all throughout the game, so it really feels like a very lived-in world, and you really do feel like you're Batman. I would say maybe more than the other games in the series.
Was the ending up to what you were expecting? Were you satisfied with the ending?
Well, the funny thing about it is there's like multiple endings for the game, and to get 100%, you have to. If you get the real true ending, you have to beat the game 100%. So if you're not a huge gamer, I would suggest just watching it on YouTube after you beat the main story. It's I don't want to give anything away, but it's a little open-ended, and it's not exactly what I was expecting, but it does kind of, there are some seminal Batman graphic novels that I instantly think of when I see this ending. In terms of where things could go in the future. So I really enjoyed it. I did like the ending, and I definitely liked the journey.
I think the only complaint I've heard, and I can I can see how it's a mild complaint was that people say there was too much Batmobile, having to use the Batmobile too much throughout the game. Would you agree with that, or what's your take on that?
There are two main complaints that I see. The first one is just the Arkham Knight in general.
Yeah.
The character of the Arkham Knight. It's still worked out, and the story that they tell with them is good. But I do understand people that wish that part could have been better. For the Batmobile, it's something we've been waiting for, not only since this franchise started, but since the game, to have a really, truly immersive experience with the Batmobile. And it's got a learning curve. That's the problem. Like it does all the things you expect the Batmobile to do and more. And more part is kind of the part that people don't like, I think. You can race around the streets and fast travel with it. But they kind of shoehorn in this like battle mode where the Batmobile transforms into like strafing tank, which once you get used to it, I really, really enjoy it, and I think it's really a lot of fun. But you have to buy into it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To really enjoy it. So it's not something you can just pick up and play and be great at. And I know like a lot of people get stuck at this one part where they really force you to start using it. So once you get over that hump, I found it to be really enjoyable. For my exception was they do kind of force a few boss fights in there that make you use the Batmobile, and it's a little frustrating. But I just saw it as I bought into it. It's something that I got through because I enjoy the game so much. And
I know you said,
hard.
Gotcha. I know you said that the ending is a little open-ended, and this, of course, is billed as the end of a trilogy of games.
Yeah.
Do you think Rocksteady does another Arkham game, or is this it, or what? And just what do you think the future of Batman in video games is right now?
Well, it's an interesting prospect because they have done 3 out of the 4 main games in the series. I feel like it's really hard to tell, but I feel like they're not done with DC characters. I don't feel like they're done with Batman.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe the next game, like they will make it, with the same, style and maybe the same characters, but it might be. My prediction is that might be more of an evolution of what's come before. Maybe it might be multiplayer or Justice League or something like that. I don't know if it'll continue this Arkhamverse type of thing. But the studio that made WB, I think Montreal, who made Arkham Origins, maybe they're going to do like an Arkham Origins sequel or another Arkhamverse game. So Rocksteady can be the pioneer that makes the brand new, like, crazy new franchise type of game. So.
Yeah, I mean, if you played Origins, there is a pretty lengthy gap in between the Origins timeline up until the first Arkham game by Rocksteady.
Yeah.
So there could be several games, I guess, if you wanted to go that route. And I liked Arkham Origins. I thought it was kind of got bashed a little bit unfairly, but that's a different conversation.
Yeah.
So, well, anything else you want to add about Arkham Knight this year? It was one of the main events of Batman in 2015.
I feel like it's an incredible game. If you're a Batman fan at all, you owe it to yourself to play the game. I'm telling you, because the story is incredible, the gameplay is incredible, graphics are incredible. It's something you can't experience anywhere but in this video game, and it's just one of the best pure Batman experiences I've ever experienced, especially since I played all the other games. And not to spoil anything, but the 2 main voice actors, in the game are incredible, especially, Kevin Conroy. Oh my God. Like, most of the time, you kind of feel like Kevin Conroy's great. He's our Batman. Sometimes you feel like maybe they overuse him and you want to just, in certain products, you want to hear different people. But, he's been a entire franchise. And I feel like he really pulled out all the stops for this performance in Arkham Knight. Like, none of it is, like, half-assed or anything. He did an incredible job with what he was tasked to do with the story and everything.
Okay, I do have to ask you before we go. So we'll talk a little bit. We're going to move on to a different medium here, film. So what how much are you looking forward to Batman v Superman? What's your whole thoughts about that? We've had 3 trailers this year. The marketing is really starting to kick in. We've seen plenty of pictures and so forth. So what's your take on this new big event that's coming in just 3 months from now?
Yeah, I can't believe it's only 3 months away. I mean, I'm really excited about it because it's more than just Batman and Superman. It's the whole DC extended universe coming together. But obviously, I'm most excited about Batman. You know, ever since Ben Affleck was cast, at places like Work and Everything, I've had to tell people it's going to be fine. Don't worry, it's going to be fine. You know, they are good, talented people making this movie. They are not going to let it be bad. Feel like there's maybe been a few missteps in the marketing along the way. You know, you've got your Strange Lex Luthor and things, but maybe we're not seeing everything in context and everything. So I am still excited. I can't wait to see what they do with it. And I think after the Ben Affleck was announced, I was just like, it makes sense. It's going to work. You know, our end game, I'm sure that both of us want is, you know, we want Ben Affleck to direct a Batman movie. So I think that's going to, when that happens, I feel like that's going to be the icing on the cake. You know, anything right now is icing on the cake after the Dark Knight trilogy. So I'm just excited to see. I'm just going to sit back and see where it goes, and I know they're going to treat Batman well.
What was your favorite trailer they released this year?
My favorite trailer, unquestionably, was the second Comic-Con trailer. Yeah, because the tone worked, the music worked. You know, it gave you just enough about the story to where you didn't feel like anything was spoiled or anything, and just enough about the characters and what the central conflict of the plot, you know, hopefully kind of is. I feel like the newest trailer, the third trailer, I liked it, but I felt like it screamed to me that they were really trying to make it very, very mainstream for people that aren't really invested in it yet. So
it seemed to be it was more for the mainstream audience than opposed to, because, you know, I mean, the bottom line is everybody like us, the fans, whether they're complaining about the film or not, they're all going to see it opening weekend anyway. So that's, you know, they don't have to sell it to us.
Yeah, and I understand that. I mean, I saw the trailer, I'm like, okay, for me, it's fine. The movie's going to be, I know, but this trailer, it's just a trailer. It did what it was supposed to do. You know, even with the Doomsday reveal, like I don't think that's all of it. I feel like there's got to be more to it than that. So.
Yeah, it's got to be. I mean, I can't see them giving away the whole plot. You know, in a 2.5 minute trailer, I would be very disappointed. You know,
it's just almost like they're playing with our expectations at this point. You know, and it's fine. I think it's going to be fine.
All right, very good there. Hey, Ryan, anything you want to plug? You can plug your Twitter. Anything else you got going on websites? Anything else? Throw it out there, man.
Yeah, you know, when I'm not writing about Batman on BOF, I run the website exclusively dedicated to the 1993 Super Mario Brothers movie, which is just a ton of fun, and there's like a ridiculous amount of info on it. So that website is smbmovie.com, and my Twitter is smb_Ryan. That's where you can chat it up about Batman or whatever.
All right, then. Hey, I appreciate you coming on for the podcast. Thanks for everything you've done on Batman on Film, and we're looking forward to Batman v Superman, and we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it next March. Thanks, Ryan.
Awesome, no problem.
You have been listening to the Batman on Film podcast. Follow Jet on Twitter @BatmanOnFilm. Email your questions via jet@batman-on-film.com. Thank you and good night.